Hello, everybody, and welcome to Pagabo Live, a new initiative designed to promote knowledge in the public sector. My name's Tom, and over the next 45 minutes, I'll be guiding you through the summer refurbishment works within the education sector and also the wider public sector with the help of a series of expert voices. So I hope we'll be able to turn the cameras on and join me now. First off should be Matt Flint.
Hi everyone, my name is Matthew Flint. I'm an Associate Director at Edge.
Hello guys, my name's Kevin Dodds. I'm Construction Director at F Tomlinson.
Hello everybody, my name's Samantha Hunter. I'm Deputy Director of Estates and Capital Projects for Dudley College.
And Emma, are you there?
I am here, sorry. Hi everyone, Emma Hesbrook, Head of Delivery at Pagabo for the Midlands and Wales region.
Excellent. Well, thank you very much, guys. So just to go through what today's agenda will be, Matt will kick us off covering how specialist knowledge can be utilised when it comes to these summer works and also talk about some of the timelines that are going to be considered. That should hopefully segue nicely into Kevin talking about the role of early engagement and collaboration and some of the parameters that need to be considered as well. We'll then conclude with the presentation element of today with some real life examples of accessing funding and how projects play out in reality from Sam utilising her experience at Dudley College, and there'll also be input at the end from Pagabo's very own Emma on procurement using direct awards. So after that, we'll have a Q&A session with all of today's panelists, so make sure that you're using the Q&A box at the bottom of your Zoom screen to submit any questions you may have throughout. Our guys may be typing some responses away to you, but those that we don't get to, hopefully we'll have time to speak to in the Q&A at the end of the day. We'll also be bringing back our flash polls. They were very successful during our last episode. Basically, they will appear on screen and they'll have 30 seconds to respond, and those answers will hopefully inform the rest of our discussion today. And in fact, right on cue, hopefully we can fire up the first poll asking you guys how aware you are of procurement and project timescales for refurbishment work. So if you could open the poll now, please. We'll give you around 30 seconds to respond. We'll also be asking you at the end whether this has got any better. So how, in a scale of 1 to 4, 1 being unprepared and 4 being incredibly well prepared and aware of all the timescales that are involved, make sure you answer now. And we'll just give that another 10 seconds or so before we go into the first presentation. Brilliant. So if you could close that poll now, please. Wonderful. Well, the good news is we're starting from quite a high knowledge base, so that hopefully today's presentations might add a little bit more to that for you. But we'll kick off our first presentation, which is from Matt. Matt, away you go.
Hi everyone, thank you for joining. So just to recap, I'm Matthew Flint, Associate Director with Edge. As a building surveyor, I'm going to be mainly focusing on sort of the small to medium-sized projects. Next slide, please. So just a quick run through of Edge. We're a multidisciplinary practice based nationwide out of 5 offices. We've got a specialist education team and deliver schemes from sort of 20k up to sort of new builds, so 34 million pounds. Next slide, please. So I've been working in the education sector for 20 years. So I've sort of, I think I worked it out on my 22nd round of summer works projects. It's fairly obvious why we do works and target works to be done over the summer. It's the only sort of substantial period of time to complete any building works. But it is a challenge, and even after this long, each year throws up its own unique challenges. And ultimately, it's quite a big competition because we're competing, for resources, materials. There's every sort of school, college, university up and down the country are trying to complete works at the same time, and as a result, there is a cost implication to that. But what we found is, the more preparation you can do, the more prepared you are, the more chance you've got of success. Next slide, please. So what I've sort of outlined here really is just sort of a brief overview of how we look at the year. So, what I'm trying to show here is that, so sort of September through to December, it's identifying what projects you'd like to do over the summer. Hopefully by the Christmas period, you've sort of identified those and you're starting to engage with consultants and getting who will then sort of get those works tendered and priced for you, ready for sort of an appointment time around the sort of the May mark, which gives contractors sufficient time to start works, ready for the July start. Next slide, please. So in terms of prioritising works, often we'll find that well-prepared, client organisations, they'll have, a business plan for their establishment. Often within that, there'll be an estate strategy, which will sort of have priorities, condition surveys, sort of which identify what maintenance items are coming up. And as consultants, I guess that's where we sort of can help in terms of putting together feasibility studies, starting to granularize those projects, helping to pull together budget costs together, program planning. We also can assist with funding bids as well. Next slide, please. So come the sort of December, January window, hopefully, that's when we tend to get more on board in terms of it being a defined project. And one of the first things that we'll look to do is sort of identify, is the works, can it only be completed over the summer period? Or, often we'll find there's quite a lot of projects which don't quite fit into that 6-week window, such as, toilet refurbs, food technology classrooms, science labs. They're just slightly, sort of 8 to sort of 10 weeks, which generally can fit in, after the examination period. Often there's year groups that leave, which gives some flexibility over space, and we can often make that work. In terms of, occasionally we'll have projects that are identified as summer schemes but aren't really dependent on the summer, such as roofing works. Boilers are another one which really are dependent on the heating season, and again that can sort of expand the period of time that you can complete the works. Some things that can sometimes trip you up if you're not engaged wide enough. Summer schools often are done by external providers, and can sometimes be a bit of crossover and overlap where, and if you've got enough planning, you can sort of avoid that. Equally, exams, a lot of retakes are done over the summer, and then occasionally open days, if those do fall over the summer, if those are programmed in with a contractor, you can either, down tools for the day, or you can prepare the space so that, even if it's not finished, it's ready for viewing. Next slide, please. So I won't go too depth into specifications, but all I will say is that, basically what we'll try and do is to look at the specification and see if, we can get things that are prefabbed off-site, to help to, speed up the construction during those periods. We'll also be reviewing time scales and leading periods, making sure that we're not specifying things that can't be delivered over, between that period of time that you've got from engaging the contractor. Statutory approvals, they can sometimes be a bit of a headache. Once upon a time, planning permission used to take about 8 weeks. It's many years since that's been the case, and often you're looking at more sort of 12 to 16 weeks, which I suppose, going back to my original programme, if you do need planning, you probably need to be looking at bringing some of those timescales forward. As a rule of thumb, although you have permitted development rights, really if there's anything that's happening externally or you're increasing space internally, then there's a good chance it might need planning. With the Building Safety Act coming in this year, again, we're expecting building control approval times to also increase slightly. Not always as big a factor as planning, but something to consider as you need to have more detailed information in order to apply. Next slide, please. So tendering periods. So small works I've sort of identified. It's not typically something that we tend to get involved with. It tends to be sort of smaller in nature and simplified, and as it's something that the schools are more than capable in delivering themselves. All we would say is that where we do see problems occurring, it's when the scope's not clearly defined and the work. So we'd sort of advise that if you are going out and getting prices, that you don't need to be a technical professional to sort of list out what it is that you want doing, getting breakdowns of the costs and not just relying on a lump sum at the end, making sure that you've got agreed deadlines, and that hopefully will help to improve your chances of a successful scheme. Where we are more involved is sort of the medium-sized schemes, and sort of 50 to 750. Obviously, the larger the scheme, the more likely it is to overlap the summer holiday period. What we'll tend to do there is using, for example, the Pagabo DPS framework. We'll be going out for expressions of interest at sort of REBA stage 3, so towards the end of the outline design period, where essentially which will start to engage with the supply chain, get contractors that are interested in pricing the scheme, so that when you do then go out for your prices, that you've got contractors that that are interested. Larger schemes, I think, is going to be covered in a bit more detail later. Next slide, please. So another often tricky or stumbling block is approval periods. So as a consultant body, especially dealing with new clients, I suppose it's making sure that they're aware of what your approval periods are. There's nothing worse than you've got all your prices in, you know exactly what you want to do, but you've missed your board approval date by a week, and then you've got 3 or 4 weeks to wait for the next one to get the approvals, and as a result, the difference of 3 or 4 weeks can be the difference between getting a scheme on site over the summer and not. And it's just making sure that you're giving your contractors plenty of time. The more time that they've got to prepare, get their orders placed with their supply chain, the better prepared you are for when you do start on site. Next slide, please. Just conscious of time. So construction period. So all I would think about is, hopefully, if we've done lots of preparation in terms of client changes, they're kept to a minimum. Where you do get client change, you're kind of giving your contractor a perfect excuse to say, we've not been able to finish it because we've had this change. Obviously, there will be changes, and it's just making sure that you've got clear lines of communication and sort of a change control procedure to manage those. We'd also sort of advise making sure that regular site meetings are happening between the consultants and the contractors. Generally we do that on a weekly basis, and that sort of fortnightly, there's more of a sit down meeting where you can check up on actions and make sure that things are progressing. Next slide, please. So I won't run through all of these, but basically what I've tried to pull together is sort of how we see sort of typical time periods depending on the type of project that you're looking to deliver. So I suppose as sort of final point, really, it's the more prepared you can be, and the earlier you can bring your sort of consultants and contractors on board, that you'll be reducing your risk in terms of problems later down the line, and your chances of success. So and that's me done. Sorry, I have put a few product examples on, but I'm conscious of time, so I'll hand back to you, Tom, if you wanted to skip over those ones.
That's very kind of you, Matt. Thank you very much. Appreciate the consciousness of time as well. I was going to start asking you along at some point, so that's good to know. Excellent. Well, thank you very much, Matt, for that. Before we move on to our next presentation, we've got another quick flash poll for you guys. So have you at any point fallen foul of unexpected delays during refurbishment works? If you could open the poll now, please. And again, we'll give you around 30 seconds to answer that. And it'll be an interesting discussion point heading towards the Q&A at the end of the webinar. Okay, if you can close the poll now, please. And the fairly resounding 92% of people who have voted in this webinar have said that yes, we have experienced unexpected delays. Perhaps we should start calling them expected delays. We'll pass you over now to Kevin, who will give you a bit more information from the contractor side.
Thanks, Tom. Yeah, thanks, Matt. It was very refreshing to hear a client to consultant saying you've got to give the contractor the best chance. So thanks for that. Right, just reiterate who I am. So Kevin Dodds, Construction Director for F Tomlinson. We often get a large part of our summer projects coming in a little bit later than we'd expect. So hopefully a little bit of this information today will enlighten clients and partners about perhaps a slightly better way of doing things. So just skipped over the first slide, so we'll go straight on. That's me. And then the next one was, we've had quite a long and enduring relationship with Wigston Queen Elizabeth College in Leicester, and we've been working there for several years. We've had a 5-year college master plan. We've done 3 phases in recent years. The first phase was, shall we say, a little bit of a hurry, and lots of deliveries, and lots of the work was very last minute because we didn't have sufficient time planning at the beginning. But over the last couple of years, we've improved that considerably, and we are now planning to start again this summer, very shortly actually. But we've been in the planning stage of that right from September, October last year. Been various works carried out, window replacements, modifications, some quite significant structural alterations, which have taken quite a lot of planning, particularly in with regard to temporary works and propping and ordering for windows and door sets and door frames, which all are on long lead-in. So the byword for all of this is early planning and early engagement so we can engage with our supply chain, with our subcontractors, and get those orders in as soon as possible and get surveys carried out. But just to take a step back slightly from what Matt said earlier, is do these works need to be carried out at all in the summer period or expressly only in the summer period? There are undoubtedly some works that need to be done when staff, students aren't around, particularly obviously things like asbestos removal and such like, and survey works, intrusive works and things like that. But, you know, ourselves and the other Pagabo framework contractors have got extensive experience on working on live campuses, on live sites, and we can put the measures in place, we can put the segregation in place, we can put the education in place with our workforce to sort of hopefully calm any safeguarding fears that schools and colleges might have. Not all works have to be crammed into that 5, 6, 7, 8 weeks in the summer period, and there's quite extensive amount of works we can do. Going on to that, we do need to manage expectations, and we have in the past had to advise clients that just can't be done, that that's a step too far, and you know, that won't be done. You do have to build a little bit of contingency plans in place and a little bit of float in the programme, because inevitably, especially on refurbishment and modifications, something will go wrong. There will be some unforeseen parameters that we've not thought about. And, you know, if you've got all your weekends at work and the late shifts at work, you've got nowhere to go. And the worst thing you can do for clients in this stage, in this instance, is, give them the week before the college or school's due to come back. The works aren't going to be complete. So communication, I'll come back to, is paramount. I've skipped about a bit, so Tom, we best go on the next slide then. So early engagement, as we said, it allows us to plan. It allows us to establish our internal workforce and our internal resources. And this facilitates early engagement with our supply chain, I've said, and that can only bring time and cost savings because, of course, over that summer period, everybody wants to go on holiday. Our staff want to go on holiday, supply chain staff wants to go on holiday, and if we're coming to them very late in the day, that's only going to put prices up to the detriment of the scheme and to the client's budget, obviously. Thanks, Tom. Next one. Very important, early meetings. Matt talked a little bit about this, is establishing the parameters and making sure that budgets are realistic. Again, the early engagement aspect allows some opportunity for value engineering if that's necessary. Really important as well to engage with all the stakeholders. And we talk about, the department heads, the actual users of the facility at the end, so that they're clear about what's happening. We've invariably got into projects and people at the sharp end, shall we say, are using that facility onto what we're doing, which areas have to be cleared before the summer break starts, which areas they won't have access to in the first week or two when they come back. And that's really important to engage everyone in that planning process. So that was the cost plan as well. So I have our quantity surveyors, etc., to make sure the budget's realistic and we're coming in within the budget available to the client. Next one, thanks. Lots. Matt's touched on this as well. Lots of the stuff takes a long time to get on order. As I said earlier, you're talking about windows, you talk about door sets. The 12, 13 weeks. Sometimes if you're talking about lifts, it could be 20 weeks. Lots of things are very long lead in, and the earlier we get engaged, the earlier we communicate with our supply chain. There's no problem at all. We're talking open book policy, and we're talking, we'll get adequate number of quotations to demonstrate best practice and best value. But you've got to get talking to people as soon as possible, and only then can you get all the ducks in a row ready for a hitting the ground running kind of start. Thanks, Tom. Again, I suppose the watchword of this is early engagement. It's buildability advice. The client that did have aspirations for doing 15 or 20 classrooms during a relatively short summer period. We had to explain that this wasn't viable. We gave them a manageable amount of work to be carried out, and allowed us for those early orders and long lead-ins for those trades that I've mentioned earlier. Particularly, as I said, on some of these developments, we had structural steel work and lots of propping and temporary works to be carried out. So they were really important to get in so early, because you'd never stand a prayer of getting on site with those if you start ordering in June. So I think that's slightly shortened version to hopefully get us back on track with time. And Tom's got another question for us.
Yeah, thank you, Kevin. That's a good abridged version there of where you need to be on a certain timescale. So thank you very much for that. Yeah, we're back to the poll questions. We told you to keep these coming at you and keep you paying attention. So how far in advance have you planned for your 2024 summer works that you might be undertaking? Or if you are on sort of contractor side, how early have you been engaged on these? So a few options there. I know from what Kevin's just said there that there's I know what option the GFT guys would be ticking on that as to the ideal. So be interesting to see what the response is on this one. I'll give you another sort of 10 seconds in which to reply before we move on to Sam's presentation. Brilliant. So we can close that poll now, please. Well, the good news there is that people are starting to got the message to an extent. So good to see a lot of more of early planning than we may have potentially anticipated when putting this webinar together. So a nice positive thing to move on to our next presentation from, which will be from Samantha Hunter from Dudley College.
Hi everyone, my name's Samantha Hunter. I'm Deputy Director of Capital Projects and Estates at Dudley College. Before I start going through the slides, I'm just going to share a little bit of my journey. I worked a large proportion of my career, 17 years, for a local authority within a multidisciplinary department delivering capital projects. My bias is architecture, so I've designed and specified and ran on site contracts, everything from small toilet refurbishments and single classroom extensions through to multi-million pound purpose buildings and leisure facilities. A huge proportion of these were for frantic programmes, with funds being released at the start of a financial year, requiring works on site during summer closures, and sometimes completing in that period and sometimes following on. This led to my roles in capital projects and estates, leading for multi-academy trusts and also now Dudley College of Technology. Next slide, please. So Dudley College Learning Quarter, we have two, Dudley based and also Brierley Hill. Just to understand the size of our portfolio, we have 10 sites in the Dudley Quarter and a further 3 in the Brierley Hill. These are delivering further education from all spectrums, everything from sixth form in engineering, construction, sports, art, media, hair and beauty, and also a retail outlet. Next slide, please. So a lot of our funding is grant funding. We've been successful with CTF funding, very similar to CIF on academies, which is Capital Transformation Fund. So we bid for these processes. We were up against 62 colleges sharing 405 million. Similarly, I've done the same on CIFs and had great success for that. And then we also have had good success rates with SAILEX funding, which is decarbonisation money as well. When we went in for our original grants, we were looking for a total of around 11 million, and we actually only got awarded 9 million for our 4 contracts. So straight away, we had to quite look at collaboration with contractors and ways of contracting this so that we could actually get these works to budget. We've also had success with SAILEX bids, and they've been very good for us because they're multi-year grants, and the beauty of that is it enables you to have a planning and enabling year. If we were to be awarded some of these works, which are critical decarbonisation works with boilers involved and also DNA upgrades, if we were awarded those monies in April, there'd be no physical way we could start those works on site in the summer and get them done. Next slide, please. So one of our grant funding was eBlock, a new animal sciences centre for Dudley College of Technology. This original scheme was going to be a demolition of an existing building and then a new build. We used a collaborative IPI contract. Dudley College has got great success with IPI, one of the only people who use it in the UK. And IPI, Animal Science eBlock, was done under a first IPI trial as a light version through the Pagabo framework. And that started last September and that's running on to this September. So whilst this isn't a summer holiday project, it is a big piece of work, £7 million contract that's currently on our Broadway site. Next slide, please. So to put it in context, Dudley College has got about £13 million worth of work currently being done this academic year. And this is something that we've had to do just to get our heads around how it affects our site. So the green area, animal science at the back, is just one £7 million piece of work. At the same time, we're running in tandem window replacements around our whole Broadway campus. And these are done from 2 funding pots, from FECTF and also from SAILEX. And this amounts to about £2 million worth of windows done through various contracts. We've also got SAILEX funding for an energy centre, which is the orange to the rear. That's a new energy centre for air source heat pumps. As part of that is a national grid DNO upgrade, switchgear and incoming supply, which is seeing half of the campus's driveway having to be dug up, which is the orange line that goes up from it. We've also got to change all the radiators within the whole of the Broadway site, as well as the windows. At the same time, we've got to manage a small toilet refurbishment and a building refurbishment further down the road, 12 the Broadway. Next slide, please. So the complexities we've had with the energy centre particularly is, whilst it's a standalone energy centre to the rear of the site, which is over a multi-year bid with Salex, what is on a critical path is the replacement of the internal radiators. So we're having to, as soon as the heating season goes off in April, and this is very much where Matt alluded to, that not all works are just summer holiday. Different heating works tend to be within the heating seasons, which is April through to October. So from April, we've got the luxury of being able to turn our boilers off, and then we're doing a rolling rotation around the whole of the school site, classrooms at a time, replacing these radiators. We've got 400 radiators we physically have to change by the heating season going back in October. So that's something we're managing. And at the same time, if you're on to the next slide, we're also trying to replace all of the windows. So we've made a good head start with the windows. We had a trial week. We took the advantage of an October half term where we thought what we could deliver in terms of window replacements, and we did a trial to determine the rate. So we established that we could change 4 windows a day. So that for us is 2 classrooms. So with some careful programming internally with our timetabling team, we've been able to take out 2 classrooms right the way from October half term all the way through to September this year. And a rolling programme, we literally are just closing off 2 rooms, replacing the windows and reopening them. And that's been done with great collaboration. Now, where we've benefited from this is because our original animal science building for 7 million was done under an IPI collaborative contract through the Pagabo framework. We were then able to give a direct award to the same main contractor, in this case it's Speller Metcalfe, to carry on doing these works. The sheer volume of work we've got on the Broadway site at the moment has been so challenging, should we have had multiple contractors all working in the same areas. So by giving those direct awards to Speller Metcalfe, we've got one principal contractor on site under CDM, and it's made it really easy to mitigate any issues we may have. The beauty is we've also been able to utilise some buying gain by using the same window manufacturer throughout, and we've been able to program it, and it's also helped keep continuity on site. All jobs, they have their odd hitches, things that may or may not go wrong, and by having one main contractor doing multiple contracts on the site and using the same supply chain, if we were running behind on one contract, we were able to move people back and forth from the various contracts. So the window replacements almost become a bit of a support as well to the main building. A snippet at the bottom, which is quite interesting, is what I do as a client. Every week I send out an email to all staff across the whole of the college with just a colour-coded plan, and it shows which rooms are going to be done at which days, timetabling, re-timetabling the learners, but at least it gives everyone a heads up. So if there's any issues or people think there's an area of concern, we can quite easily mitigate those. Some of them are staff areas which we've used. We've done those ad hoc when we can't get into classrooms. The classrooms are done a rolling programme, and things like the internal stairwells and the front entrance, which you can see on the image there, we've had to use college closures. So the front entrance was done at February half term, along with the learner services rooms, which is the 4 windows to the right. A lot of we've been able to do quite quickly as well off MUPEs. Next slide, please. So I just want to stress the importance of planning ahead. As a college, we have an estate strategy, and it's very, very important that within your estate strategy, you forecast ahead, think what sort of things you're going to be doing and what you're going to be delivering. I mean, these are just some examples that we've got to do over the next 3 years, things that we've got funding for and we're going for funding for. We successfully did 2 coffee shop refurbishments last summer. and the designs for the counters were designed and pre-ordered in the Easter, ready for us to start at the end of the June when the college throttles down for the learners. So the whole of the 2 coffee shops were done in tandem on 2 different sites from June through to September. And to put in perspective, the counter replacement was literally just 1 week of that programme. But be careful, collaboration, early enabling works and forward planning, everything was in place to allow that to happen. Next slide, please. So lessons learnt. Education and refurbishments are usually restricted to 6 weeks, but this isn't always the case with colleges. We have a little bit longer. So that planning process is really, really critical, making sure that everything's in place and everything's considered. As a client, don't be scared to pull together some rough programs in relation to the contracts you've got, their sizes, the direct durations, and particularly some of those interdependencies. We've got lots of different works across different sites, and we've been able to reduce timeframes on some of them by working quite cleverly. Early collaboration with procurement frameworks. The early you've got something that you need to procure, that you start talking to with the frameworks, getting out expressions of interest to the contractors, look at the procurement routes that are available, and really consider those direct awards where you've got really good established relationships with contractors. Consider amalgamating contracts, what we've done from animal science and the windows and the heating. Just by amalgamating those contracts, we've created so much financial value, and the ease of management and stress for us as a building user has been immense. Ensuring the permissions are in place as well to get these programmed in. Dudley College is located by a priory and by a zoo, so we've had to do a lot of early engagement with our planning department, particularly with how some of the buildings are changing. We've had pre-application talks with our national grid. We did a lot of early engagement to ensure that we've been able to get the switch gear delivered and on time so that we can close our driveway off during our Easter holiday. So that could be digged up to get the infrastructure in round to a new transformer for our energy centre. If we couldn't have got that time slot, there is no way we could have done those enabling works to get everything done in the summer. Talking to the supply chain about their lead times and contractors, and just try and mitigate some of your project risks. If you've got good relationships with people, exploit them. Talk to your reps. Talk to particularly people like IPS. Have a think about how you want your toilets to look, layout. Start talking to reps, get them to draw up some rough designs for you. Anything you can do to give your contractors a head start, or to get your head around what you want as a client before you get a main contractor on board, it'll just mitigate any risks on your contract. Utilising closures, weekends, early starts, late finishes for disruptive works. We've done lots of works like scaffolding erections have gone up on Saturdays because of the noise. They've been starting early, and then they've been taking their breaks as we start in the morning, and then moving on to using spanners rather than impact drivers to keep noises down. And as has been said throughout the seminar, not all works have to be done through the summer or site closures. Do as much as you can do in non-critical spaces throughout the year. Prioritise early asbestos R&Ds. We've just done, we've took the opportunity because the colleges return a week later in January. So the first week in January, we just took the opportunity to do all of our refurbishment and demolition service on our asbestos before the learners came back in. And that's for works, that's for a curtain walling replacement. We're doing some internal courtyards in the summer holiday, and also for the boilers that are being, the fossil fuel boilers that are being stripped out from our plant rooms to replace air source pump rooms in the summer. So we've done those R&Ds early. So this month we've been able to review those and see if there's any notifiable works that need to be carefully programmed in the critical programme, and if there's any non-notifiable works that we can get done. We've got a number of school and college closures between now and when the main event happens in the summer, so taking advantage of Easter and Whitsun to get some of these strip outs done to just make everything a little bit smoother and a little bit quicker. Really look at what you want to do on your jobs. really consider if there are any long lead-ins. Is there anything you can pre-order or pre-design? Is there anything you can pre-purchase on vesting certificates to secure those materials and dates for your contractors? It saves so many headaches. Never underestimate the importance of preparing an opportunity or risk register as well. Looking at if there's any things that you can do or where problems could happen and how you can try and mitigate some of those risks ahead of time. Have you got other spaces that you can use if the job runs over a little bit? A spare classroom you can use? Can you decant early? So make sure that those spaces are clear to give your contractors the opportunity to go at 100 mile an hour the first day. And as a client, be very proactive and pull together a calendar of your events, your exams and schedules, and communicate them well to the delivery team. It's really important to know when exams are, if you've got works on site, particularly with the noise levels. We've had so many jobs that I've had the call going, can you keep the noise down? We've got an exam in X, Y, or Z room, and I've had to remind maybe the contractors to move to spanners as we agreed on scaffolding installations and things like that. But last but not least, do what you're doing today. Join groups, share best practices. There's Colleges West Midlands, there's AOC, there's plenty of things out there that are doing webinars and seminars where they can share best practice on mitigating some of these problems we find on site. Thank you.
Super. Thank you very much, Sam. Some really excellent examples there, and definitely some learnings for people to take from a client perspective. Before we go into our last presentation, we have got another poll for you. So if you could fire that poll up now, please. If you're planning on carrying out works this summer, how prepared are you? Are you well prepared? Are you still assessing the procurement options, or are you going to admit that you aren't quite as prepared as you'd like to be? Give you another sort of 10-15 seconds on that to get your answers in. I know we've had quite a lot of attendees today, and also if you'd like to get any questions in for our Q&A session, which will start after our final presentation with Emma, you can get those in via the Q&A box. We've seen a few already coming in, so thank you, and we'll make sure that we get to as many of those as we can. Yeah, close the poll now, please. Well, a pretty good sign there that 46% consider themselves well prepared. But again, around 30% saying they aren't quite as prepared as they'd like, which probably shows the value of sessions such as these. So what we'll do now is we'll move on to our final short presentation of the day, which is from Emma from Pagabo.
Thanks, Tom. Hi, everyone. As mentioned during introductions, I'm Emma Hesbrook, Head of Delivery for Midlands and Wales at Pagabo. Before joining Pagabo, I was procurement manager at University of Wolverhampton, where I supported the estates team to procure their projects, including summer works. And now I support clients at Pagabo to do the same. So hopefully I can provide you with some useful insights. Next slide, please. So timescales for tendering really depends on the scope of the project. If you're looking at some small scale roofing repairs in isolation, for instance, your tender period would be shorter than if you were procuring a main contractor to carry out roof repairs, as well as install new windows, a new boiler system, and refurbish a couple of classrooms. The main contractor on this tender, for example, would need to engage with their supply chain to complete their tender, which would mean giving them longer to price to ensure a tender return. Generally, though, if you're looking at a single stage traditional or D&B tender where the contractor is providing you with a fixed lump sum bid, I'd say factor in a 4-week period on smaller projects and a 6-week tender period on larger schemes, with around 2 weeks for the evaluation. If you're procuring your projects on a 2-stage basis, the stage 1 tender period would be much shorter than this because the contractor isn't having to cost up the scheme or engage with the supply chain. They're simply providing you with their OH&P, design-related costs and prelims if the design is developed enough to do so. So here the contractor could turn around a relatively simple bid with appropriate quality questions in around 3 weeks. I'd say you can also evaluate stage 1 bids much quicker as the commercials aren't as complex to review, so you could factor in about a week here. So ultimately, the tender process itself with evaluation and award could take between 4 to 8 weeks, dependent on the procurement route. If you didn't use a framework and decided to conduct an open market tender, you'd obviously need to add in extra time in your programme for the initial SQ part of the tender process. I'd always advise doing a restricted process here, so doing an SQ and then inviting the shortlisted contractors to tender, for those carrying out open market tenders for works projects, given the time and resource it takes for contractors to bid the schemes, as well as the number of contractors in the market that might potentially bid. So under PCR 2015, your SQ period has to be a minimum of 30 days, I think, unless you've published a prior information notice where it can be reduced to 15 days. And also you'd have to factor in evaluation time and issuing your shortlisting letters to contractors. So essentially, if you go open market, you've got to factor in a considerable amount of time more. I'd also advise not to forget to build in time for your own governance, both throughout the tender process and following award. If you're doing a two-stage complex project, you may have some form of approval process at project board meetings, for example, where REBA stages are signed off before developing design further, as well as before entering into contract. If your award reports need to be signed off by your finance director, for example, as was the case when I was at the university, make sure you know when they're on annual leave. I know that sounds really simple, but little things like that, when you haven't planned, could have a really big programme impact. Once awarded, contractors won't, and nor should they really be expected to mobilise without having a purchase order. So factor in time to get that set up on your finance systems if those suppliers are new to your organisations. And following a receipt of a PO, I'd factor in around 2 weeks before they can start on site. So with all this in mind, for a July contract award, you'd need to be looking at a tender issue in March for your contractor procurement, I think. But it's been talked about in the previous presentations. Please don't forget about market engagement before this. If you can speak to your contractors about your projects as soon as they hit your pipeline, they will then be able to plan the bidding resource in. We've seen a massive increase in contractors being unable to tender projects because they're too busy, and this is only exacerbated in the summer period. So the sooner you can start engaging with them, the more interest you're going to have in your projects. And because of this and the benefits of clients that clients have seen from collaboration, the direct award route is actually becoming more commonplace. Sam talked a lot about that in her presentation. Next slide, actually, I've got a direct award slide, haven't I? A direct award is a compliant way of awarding a contract without reopening competition. So without carrying out a tender process, essentially. So you're selecting a preferred contractor to work with on an open book basis. As I mentioned, just the direct award route is becoming increasingly used in the public sector, particularly on schemes where programme is constrained, like summer works. Just some stats here to put that into a bit of context. At Pagabo, we've supported on the procurement of 1,302 projects on a direct award basis, and this is nearly 50% of total projects procured under the frameworks. Interestingly, the lowest value was £1,000, and the largest was a absolutely mammoth 750 million. There are a whole host of benefits of carrying out a direct award over and above a traditional single stage tender, for example, one of which is speed. There's a huge programme saving in not carrying out a tender process, as I've just explained, how lengthy it can be. So based on the timescales I just talked about, you would be engaging with your preferred contractor and have them on site, months and months sooner. Not carrying out a tender process also removes associated bidding risk for both the client, as you're heading into contract with a contractor you're comfortable with, and the contractor, because they aren't pricing in bidding risk into their contract sum. So risk is a huge issue for traditional procurement. The direct award approach, which is premised on early contractor involvement and collaboration, does seek to reduce project risk as much as possible. Early engagement with a contractor as soon as you can in the design development of a project means that you can make the most of their knowledge and that of their supply chain. They'll look at the most efficient approach to the construction programme, for example. They'll propose innovative solutions, and they do this, with an eye on the cost, which ultimately then should provide design and cost certainty on a project. Contractors, in my opinion, are at the forefront of cost. They're placing orders for materials and subcontractors on a daily basis. So, costs are as up to date as they can be, and design is developed in conjunction. So essentially, you know, under early collaboration, direct award, the contractor-led team is progressing design in line with budget and market costs, whilst at the same time as looking to de-risk the scheme as much as possible. So here, the whole project is developed with that design and that cost certainty, and hopefully, therefore, will be achievable for all. I think ultimately, the direct award route enables early contractor engagement and collaboration, like we've talked about in the other presentations, and this benefits the whole project and its team. And with summer period being so constrained, I really do think it's a good procurement route to help alleviate the associated pressures. Thanks.
Super. Thank you very much, Emma, and thank you everybody for that sort of really insightful set of presentations. We've got plenty of questions coming in, so we'll try and get to as many of those as we can over the next sort of 5 minutes or so. But one final flash poll for you, if you could fire that up, please, guys. Hopefully this has got a positive response. It was quite positive in the first place anyway, but it is back to assessing how aware you now are of procurement and project timescales for refurbishment works. 4 being most aware and 1 being still not particularly aware. So if just give another 10 seconds on that so you can get your answers in. And if our panel can all make sure that they get their cameras and microphones on, so we can go to you with any questions that come in. Guys, if you could close the poll now, please. And a very positive sign there. Everyone's right down at the top end of the scale there, which is good. I mean, if ever there was need to be evidence that it was worth doing this Pagabo live session, there it is. 80% of people who have tuned in saying that they are now much more aware of project timescales and what have you than they would have been before the start of this presentation. So a good sign there. And we'll start with you, Emma. Something that really jumped out at me was that direct award stat. So 1,300 projects, nearly 50%, you said, of the stuff that Pagabo is doing in summer works is it's been direct awards. Incredible stat.
Yeah, so the 1,300 were the projects that are direct award under the framework, not necessarily they're all summer works. Right. They're just all of the direct awarded projects that have been procured under the framework as a whole. We haven't done that many summer works projects. Sorry, Tom.
No, that's fine. That was my misunderstanding of the stat. Else, but it's still an incredibly impressive number. There's something that says coming in a question from an Andy Balmond. We'll go to you with this one, Kevin, but maybe you can chip in as well, Matt. What materials are typically causing problems in terms of long lead-ins? Are these the same materials that were problematic during sort of COVID and also the crisis in Ukraine?
I think things have improved considerably since COVID. Yeah, at the time, we were having particular issues with plaster products, plasterboards particularly, and then we had cyclically an issue with steel. I think that's all calmed down now. But typically for as I say, for summer refurbishment works, we're talking about finishes items. So we're talking about internal fittings, doors, bespoke furniture, IPS units, WC refurbs and refreshers, and these are all fairly long lead-ins. I say you're talking sort of 10, 12 weeks often for these kind of things. You need to get your orders in. And to get those orders in, contractor needs the order, subcontractor needs the order, supplier needs the order. So there's a several week process before 10 weeks is press the button on buying.
Equally, I'd say that applies for things like floor finishes as well. We at the college have got quite a lot of corporate images, like carpets we like to use, and the products are they're just flying off the shelf in the summer holiday. So if you need a certain product in a certain colour, that can be quite problematic. So I think as a client, thinking of other colourways you could go, or other products you could use that look the same and the same specification. If you've got that in your mindset, that really gives your contractors a chance as well. We had a job where we did think we were going to be able to get classroom floor finishes, but quite a way I was going to say, well, don't worry about that colour, we'll have this colour, or we'll change it for this project because it's a similar look, and that really helps with the programme.
Sam, we'll stay with you actually, because there's a question regarding grants. Obviously, you mentioned Salix and a couple of others in there. How best is it to sort of apply for those grants?
Salix grant funding is quite challenging, and I've personally done some webinars for colleges West Midlands on how to try and to win those grants, because they're all very time critical. The portal opens and you have to bid. If you haven't got a bid in within 30 minutes, you're unlikely to get a Salix grant, and you have to support pull upon resources from consultants. So this is where some of the Pagabo frameworks for services can be quite helpful for people, where you can engage a consultant through the framework, get them on board to help you work up the design. So you're in a position as a client, as soon as they release those funding streams, to go straight in on a time critical manner and bid for those. I've done them with no experience whatsoever. I've been successful now on 4. But I've been supported by great consultants. So don't be afraid to get a consultant on board through a framework to help you do that, and plug those through. The other ones, the DFE ones, they advertise those, and as I think someone said in one of the chats as well, when they award them, and we've got a situation whereby with animal science, our fixtures and fittings budget hasn't even been released yet. Yet we need to be pre-ordering equipment ready for September. So it's challenging.
Yeah, it doesn't sound like a particularly easy process there. Matt, we'll go to you this one, because something that you referenced actually in your presentation was the Building Safety Act, which is also the subject of the first episode of Pagabo Live. Just how big an impact when that comes in, and it's very difficult to say until we actually know when it comes in, but how big an impact is that likely to have on project timescales?
I think it will have an impact. I mean, it's putting a lot more onus on the designers and the contractors to basically say, yes, it confirms with building control. I mean, historically, we've relied heavily on building control. You know, you've put in what you think complies, and then they confirm, but it's sort of turning that on its head, and basically it's, you know, you're telling the building control officer, yeah, as far as my best knowledge is, it complies to building control, and that's when they're checking. So I think it will, you know, and also I suppose just the fact that it's being governed a bit more rigorously will make sure that people are, you know, ensuring that everything's done right. So yeah, so I think there will be an impact. As I say, at the minute, it's a little bit up in the air as to how much of an impact.
Yeah, I think that was very much the consensus from the last episode of Pagabo Live. Actually, is there's still a heck of a lot of questions there to be answered. Well, unfortunately, that is all we've got time for today. But thank you very much for turning up in your droves once again. We can see we've still got questions flying in, but unfortunately, we have run out of time. So our guys will do our best to get to those questions in the roundup and wrap up that you will receive over email and the newsletter after this episode of Pagabo Live. The good news is you're all now part of the Pagabo Live community. So all you need to do is visit pagabo.co.uk/Pagabo Live for the link and the knowledge about our next session, which is in March, and will be on unlocking decarbonisation funding. As I mentioned, there's going to be a newsletter coming out, which comes out around a week after each Pagabo Live session. It'll have the recording of the webinar, so you'll have the slides to access. I know there's a couple of questions around those. It'll also have the webinar in video in podcast form, so you can share it with your colleagues if they didn't manage to catch it, along with further insights from the team. As I say, hopefully we'll be able to get to some of those questions that we didn't quite get round to today. Hopefully you've enjoyed today as well and found it useful. The stats seem to say that you have. So if you liked it, tell a friend, tell a colleague, tell your auntie, and we'll be back next month for our next session.